In the fading light of a late summer evening in 1978, the small town of Millfield, Ohio, buzzed with the hum of cicadas and the weight of hard times. The factories that once anchored this corner of Appalachia had begun to shutter their smokestacks, standing silent against a bruised sky. The nation was reeling from economic stagnation, and the government's youth relocation program, a desperate bid to revive struggling rural communities, had sent ripples of unease through families like the Carters. For 16-year-old Sarah Carter, standing in the cramped living room of their weathered clapboard house, the air was thick with more than just the heat of August. It carried the sting of her mother Linda's words, sharp as the butcher knife Sarah wielded at the local meat market. Linda Carter, a woman whose delicate features belied her iron will, stood with her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Sarah's younger sister, Emma. At 15, Emma was a vision of fragility, pale skin, cornflower blue eyes, and a frame so slight that a strong wind might carry her away. Sarah's strong, Linda said, her voice clipped as if stating an indisputable fact. She can handle the countryside. Emma, you're too frail for that life. You'll stay here in Millfield where it's safe. The words landed like a verdict, final and unyielding, though Linda framed it as concern. Sarah, broad-shouldered and calloused from years of chopping firewood and hauling crates, felt her chest tighten. She wasn't surprised, but the rejection still burned. The late 1970s were a time of upheaval in rural America. The Carter administration's policies pushed for economic diversification, but small towns like Millfield were bleeding jobs. The youth relocation program, modeled loosely on New Deal-era initiatives, aimed to send young people to rural areas to work on farms or in small industries, easing urban overcrowding and bolstering places struck by factory closures. For the Carters, this meant one daughter would stay in the city such as it was, with Millfield's lone diner and a flickering neon sign at the gas station, while the other would be sent to a place like Pineville, Indiana, where fields stretched endlessly and opportunity was a rumor. Sarah's earliest memories were of being the sturdy one who didn't cry when she fell, and the one who could swing an axe by age 10 while Emma shivered by the hearth. Linda had spent 3 days in labor to bring Emma into the world, a winter birth that left her weak and prone to illness. Sarah, born in the heat of summer, had thrived outdoors, building forts in the backyard, while Emma nursed fevers that drained their father Robert's modest factory wages. Linda would say, "You're like your grandpa," her tone half scolding, half resigned. "Those hands of yours more suited to a plow than a piano." Sarah had learned to swallow the comparisons, but each one carved a deeper divide between her and the mother who saw Emma as a delicate treasure and Sarah as a workhorse. Now, as Linda laid out her decision, Sarah's mind drifted to a life she shouldn't remember, but did, a past life where she'd been sent to the countryside, married a man who promised the world but delivered only pain, and fought her way to unimaginable wealth as the wife of a fast food tycoon. That Sarah had clawed her way out of poverty, her hands bloodied from labor and her heart hardened by betrayal. She remembered the glittering boardrooms, the weight of a diamond ring, and the bitter envy in Emma's eyes when they met years later, Emma's own life unraveling in the shadow of Sarah's success. The memories weren't dreams. They were sharp, vivid, as real as the faded linoleum beneath her feet. Somehow Sarah had been reborn and returned to this moment with a chance to rewrite her story. She glanced at Emma, who sat primly on the sagging couch, her hands folded like a porcelain doll's. Emma's beauty was undeniable, but her gaze had a hardness, a flicker of something knowing. Sarah's stomach twisted. Did Emma remember too? Emma had stayed in the city in their past life, married a man who lost everything in the recession, and spiraled into jealousy-fueled ruin. If Emma were reborn, she'd be dangerous, a rival who knew the stakes of their shared history. Linda stuffed a handful of butterscotch candies into Sarah's pocket, a hollow gesture to soften the blow. "The government says only one of you can stay," she said, her voice softening for Emma's benefit. "Your father's been sent to a factory in Dayton, and Emma's not strong enough for the countryside. You understand, don't you, Sarah?" It wasn't a question. Sarah opened her mouth to argue and demand fairness, but the words caught in her throat. What was the use? Linda's mind was made up, and Sarah had learned long ago that love in this house flowed unevenly. The room felt smaller, the walls closing, as Sarah wrestled with her next move. She could fight, but what would it cost? Her eyes drifted to the television in the corner, flickering with a grainy ad for a local hardware store. It was the kind of small-town channel that thrived on stories like hers, tales of struggle and triumph that kept viewers hooked. Sarah thought wryly that if her life were a show, she'd be the underdog, the one folks rooted for. Hey, if you're rooting for me, she imagined saying to an invisible audience, hit that like button, drop a comment about your family struggles, and subscribe to see how I turn this around. The thought made her lips twitch, a fleeting defiance against the weight of her mother's words. Sarah straightened, her resolve hardening. The countryside wasn't exile, it was a chance. She'd turned hardship into opportunity in her past life, building a business from nothing. This time she'd do it again, smarter, faster, and without the baggage of family expectations. As Linda fussed over Emma smoothing her hair, Sarah slipped out the door, the candies heavy in her pocket. The Ohio sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold, and Sarah felt a spark of something new, not just survival, but ambition. She'd show them all, Linda, Emma, the whole damn town, that Sarah Carter was no one's second choice. Sarah stood on the cracked sidewalk outside the Millfield train station, the air thick with the scent of diesel and late summer dust. The platform buzzed with other families, some tearful, some stoic, as young people boarded trains bound for rural outposts under the government's relocation program. Emma, dressed in a pale blue sundress that made her look like a wilting flower, clutched Linda's arm, her suitcase stuffed with the best clothes from their shared closet. Sarah's bag was lighter, just a few practical outfits and a notebook where she'd begun jotting down ideas for a future she refused to let slip away. The train whistle pierced the air, a call to a destiny Sarah wasn't ready to accept. As Linda fussed over Emma adjusting her scarf and whispering last-minute advice, Sarah's mind churned with memories that didn't belong to this life. She saw flashes of a past existence, a rural village where she'd toiled under a scorching sun, married to Jake, a charismatic but cruel man who drank away their dreams. She remembered the pain of his fists, the shame of village gossip, and the slow, grueling climb to success after leaving him. By sheer will, she'd started a roadside diner, then a chain, becoming the wife of a fast food magnate whose empire spanned states. The memories were a map guiding her through the pitfalls she'd faced before. But how had she returned to this moment, a car accident? She recalled a screech of tires, a blinding light, and then a voice, not human, whispering, "One more chance." Was it God, fate, or something else Sarah didn't know, but she felt its weight as if it were a gift and a burden. Emma's voice snapped her back to the present. "Sarah, don't look so glum," she said, her tone syrupy, but her eyes sharp. "You'll do fine in the city. You're tough." The words were laced with something more profound, a challenge. Sarah studied her sister, noticing how Emma's fingers tightened around her suitcase handle, the faint smirk playing at her lips. In their past life, Emma had stayed in Millfield, married a factory worker named Tom, who lost his job in the '70s recession and watched her life unravel as Sarah's soared. Emma's envy had turned toxic. She'd sent Sarah a poisoned pie, a betrayal that nearly ended her. Emma's sudden willingness to go to the countryside felt like a calculated move, not a sacrifice. "Mom, I'm going," Emma declared, kneeling dramatically before Linda. "Sarah's smarter, stronger. She'll be more useful here taking care of you." Her voice trembled, but Sarah caught the rehearsed cadence. Linda's eyes welled up, her resolve crumbling. "No, Emma, you're too delicate," she protested. But Emma pressed a butter knife to her wrist, not hard enough to cut, but enough to make Linda gasp. Emma whispered, "I'll go, or I'll hurt myself." Her performance flawless. Sarah's stomach churned. In their past life, Emma had faked illnesses to avoid relocation, crying for days. This time, she was fighting to go. It clicked. Emma remembered too. She was reborn, chasing the wealth and status Sarah had achieved in their past life. Sarah sat on a bench, watching the scene unfold like a play she'd seen before. Losing Emma's hands, Linda finally relented, tears streaming down her face. "Fine, but you'll write every week," she sobbed. Sarah felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of loneliness. Linda had never cried for her, never seen her as anything but a tool. The realization stung, but Sarah pushed it down. She'd learned early that dwelling on pain only slowed you down. Instead, she focused on Emma's words as she boarded the train, her suitcase clattering against the steps. "Sarah," Emma called, turning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This time I'll be the tycoon's wife." The words were a gauntlet, thrown, a declaration of war. Sarah nodded, her expression calm but her mind racing. Emma thought she could steal Sarah's past life success, marry Jake, and rewrite history. But Sarah knew Jake from before, a charming scoundrel who'd wooed her with promises and left her bruised. In Pineville, Emma would find not a path to glory but a trap of her own making. Sarah, meanwhile, saw the countryside not as exile but as a proving ground. In her past life, she'd turned dirt into gold. This time she'd do it without the scars. Emma's face pressed against the window as the train pulled away, her smirk fading into something like doubt. Sarah turned from the platform, her boots crunching on gravel. Millfield's main street stretched before her, lined with shuttered storefronts and a single diner where locals swapped stories of better days. The economic malaise of the late 70s hung heavy, but Sarah saw opportunity in the cracks. The government was loosening restrictions on small businesses, encouraging entrepreneurs to fill the gaps left by failing industries. Sarah's past life knowledge was her edge. She knew which markets would boom, which risks would pay off. She headed toward the Thompson house where Mr. Henry Thompson, a carpenter with a weathered face and a sharp mind, was rumored to have connections in the construction trade. He'd built a fortune in lumber in her past life, riding the wave of suburban expansion. Sarah needed allies, and Henry was her first choice. As she walked, she passed a community bulletin board, its flyers flapping in the breeze. One caught her eye, a hand-drawn ad for a local radio show promising tales of grit and glory. Sarah smiled faintly. If her life were a story, she'd be the hero, not the victim. And heroes, she thought, didn't wait for permission. They carved their own paths. The Millfield train station faded into the distance as Sarah Carter walked away, the rumble of Emma's departing train still echoing in her ears. The late summer air of 1978 hung heavy with the scent of sun-baked asphalt and wild honeysuckle, a reminder of the Ohio town's quiet decay. Millfield was a shadow of its former self, its factories silenced by the economic downturn that gripped the nation. The Carter administration's push for small-town revival had done little to stem the tide of joblessness, and the youth relocation program, meant to breathe life into places like Pineville, Indiana, felt more like a sentence than a solution. For Sarah, though, it was a spark. Emma's parting words, "This time I'll be the tycoon's wife," rang in her head, a challenge that lit a fire under her. She wasn't just fighting for survival, but to outshine her sister's reborn ambition. Sarah's boots crunched on the gravel path leading to the edge of town where the Thompson family's workshop stood, its weathered sign reading Thompson Carpentry Quality, since '52. In her past life, Henry Thompson had turned his knack for woodworking into a lumber empire, capitalizing on the suburban boom that swept America in the '80s. Sarah remembered him as a gruff but kind man, his calloused hands shaping oak into furniture that graced new homes from Cleveland to Columbus. Now she needed his wisdom and his connections. The government's loosening business regulations had opened doors for entrepreneurs, and Sarah's past life memories were a roadmap to wealth. She knew lumber would be gold as cities expanded, and Henry was her first step. Inside the workshop, the air was thick with sawdust and the rhythmic thud of a hammer. Henry, a broad man with graying hair and a face lined by years of labor, looked up from a half-finished table. "Sarah Carter," he said, wiping his brow. "What's a girl like you doing here? Shouldn't you be packing for Indiana?" His tone was teasing, but his eyes held a flicker of curiosity. Sarah squared her shoulders, her voice steady. "I'm staying, Mr. Thompson. I want to learn the lumber trade. I know you've got ties to builders in Dayton. Teach me and I'll make it worth your while." Henry raised an eyebrow, setting down his hammer. "Big talk for a kid. The lumber game's risky permits, bribes, competition." "You sure you're ready for that?" Sarah nodded, her past life knowledge giving her confidence. She remembered the deals Henry had struck, the way he'd navigated corrupt officials to secure contracts. "I'm not afraid of risk," she said. "I've seen what's coming, suburbs popping up, furniture in demand. Wood's the future, and I want in." Henry studied her, his skepticism softening. He'd seen too many young folks leave Millfield chasing dreams that crumbled. But Sarah's eyes burned with something different. Certainty, not desperation. "All right," he said finally. "Come back tomorrow. We'll talk timber, but don't expect me to hold your hand." Sarah grinned, a weightlifter. She had an ally, a foothold in a world that could make her unstoppable. Back home, the Carter house was a storm of tension. Linda, her mother, was sorting through Emma's old clothes, her face blotchy from crying. "You let her go," Linda snapped when Sarah walked in, her voice sharp as a whip. "You should have fought harder to take her place. She's delicate, Sarah, not like you." The words cut, but Sarah was used to them. In her past life, Linda's favoritism had driven her to the countryside, where she'd married Jake, a man whose charm masked a vicious streak. She'd endured his abuse, built a business despite him, and become a magnate's wife. Emma, meanwhile, had stayed in Millfield, married a man who lost everything, and poisoned Sarah out of envy. Emma's choice to go to Pineville wasn't a sacrifice, but a strategy. Sarah saw it in her sister's smug smile on the platform, the way she'd declared her ambition to steal Sarah's past life glory. Sarah's mind flickered to that other life, the one that ended in a car crash, a screech of metal, a blinding light, and a voice whispering, "One more chance." She didn't know why she'd been reborn, but she felt its purpose to rewrite her story, to claim the success she'd earned without the pain. Emma, too, must have heard that voice or something like it. Why else would she volunteer for Pineville, a place she'd dreaded in their past life? Sarah sat on her bed, the springs creaking, and opened her notebook. She sketched a plan learned from Henry: start a small business and beat Emma to the top. But beneath her resolve, a quiet ache stirred. She'd always wanted Linda's love, not just her grudging acceptance. The memory of Emma's train pulling away and Linda's tears for her favorite daughter left Sarah feeling like an outsider in her home. The next morning, Sarah returned to Henry's workshop, where his daughter Mary was sanding a chair, her leg in a brace from a recent accident. Mary, 18, had a quiet strength, her brown eyes sharp despite the pain she hid. "Heard you're staying," Mary said, offering a small smile. "Good. This town needs folks who don't give up." Sarah nodded, sensing a kindred spirit. Mary's injury from saving a child from a runaway horse had made her a local hero, but the medical bills were crushing the Thompsons. Sarah saw an opportunity not just to learn, but to build a partnership. "I'm starting something big," she told Mary. "Stick with me, and we'll make sure your family's taken care of." Mary's smile widened, a spark of hope in her eyes. Sarah felt a surge of purpose. She wasn't just fighting Emma, but building a future for people like Mary, who deserved better than Millfield's broken promises. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the workshop, Sarah and Henry pored over maps of lumber routes. The economic landscape was shifting, suburban sprawl was driving demand for furniture, and Ohio's forests were ripe for the taking. Sarah's past life memories told her which mills would thrive, which permits to chase. But Emma's words lingered, a taunt that fueled her drive. Emma thought she could marry Jake and ride his coattails to wealth. Sarah knew better. Jake was a trap, a man who'd break Emma before she could break him. Sarah closed her notebook, her resolve ironclad. She'd let Emma chase her illusion. Sarah Carter was building an empire, and no one, not her mother or sister, would stop her. The autumn of 1978 swept through Millfield like a chill wind, stripping leaves from the maples and exposing the town's bare bones. The diner on Main Street was half empty, its jukebox playing Dolly Parton to a scattering of truckers and retirees. The economic downturn had hit hard, but whispers of opportunity stirred. New policies from Washington encouraged small businesses, offering loans and tax breaks to those bold enough to seize them. Sarah Carter, now 16 and a half, saw the future in those whispers. Her past life memories, sharp as the scent of pine in Henry Thompson's workshop, told her this was the moment to act. While Emma chased her doomed dream in Pineville, Sarah laid the foundation for something greater. Sarah's days were split between Henry's workshop and Millfield Community College, where she'd enrolled in a 6-month business course. The government's push for education had slashed tuition, making it possible for her to attend. To fund it, she'd taken a risk that still knotted her stomach. She'd stolen $50 from Linda's cash box, a rusty tin with a faded rose pattern. It wasn't theft for spite. It was survival. Linda had screamed when she found out, pounding the kitchen table. "You're a disgrace, Sarah! Stealing from your own mother!" Sarah had stood her ground, her voice cold. "You'd rather I marry some creep for a bride price. I'm making my own way." Linda's face had twisted, but she didn't chase Sarah when she left the money tucked in her pocket for rent and books. The college was a squat brick building, its classrooms filled with farmers' kids and factory workers retraining for a new era. Sarah soaked up lessons on bookkeeping and market trends, her notebook filled with ideas for a lumber business. She'd seen the future in her past life: suburban homes sprouting like weeds, furniture stores clamoring for oak and pine. But school was only half her plan. At Henry's workshop, she learned the practical side: how to judge timber quality and negotiate with suppliers. Henry was cautious, his hands scarred from years of labor. "You're young, Sarah," he said one evening, sanding a cedar plank. "Why not stick to something safe, like typing?" Sarah shook her head. "Safe doesn't build empires, Mr. Thompson. You know that." He chuckled, impressed by her nerve. Sarah's bicycle repair stand, set up near the Greyhound stop, became her proving ground. Bikes were everywhere in Millfield, cheaper than cars in a town where gas prices stung. At first, folks scoffed at a teenage girl wielding a wrench, but Sarah's work was fast and cheap. She fixed flats and tightened chains, her hands steady from years of butchering pigs at the market. Word spread, and soon truckers and farmers were detouring to her stand. You're a natural, said old man Jenkins, a regular who tipped her with apples from his orchard. Sarah smiled, pocketing the fruit. Each customer was a connection, a thread in the network she was weaving. One evening, as Sarah closed her stand, Mary Thompson limped over her brace, clinking softly. Heard you're making a name for yourself, Mary said, leaning against a lamp-post. Her leg was healing, but the medical bills had pushed the Thompsons to the brink. Sarah saw the strain in Mary's eyes, the same quiet resilience she felt in herself. I'm just starting, Sarah said, wiping grease from her hands. But I've got plans. Big ones. You in? Mary hesitated, then nodded. For my family, yeah, I'm in. Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't expected, a sense of camaraderie rare in a life where she'd always fought alone. Mary wasn't just an ally, but proof that Sarah could build something beyond herself. At home, Linda's bitterness was a constant shadow. She'd stopped crying for Emma, but her resentment toward Sarah grew. You think you're better than us, she spat one night as Sarah ate a cold sandwich. Emma's suffering out there, and you're playing businesswoman. Sarah swallowed her hurt, her voice steady. Emma chose Pineville. I'm choosing me. Linda scoffed, but Sarah saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. Linda had always underestimated her, but Sarah's past life memories gave her clarity. Linda's love was a mirage always out of reach. The realization was freeing, but it left a hollow ache. Sarah pushed it down, focusing on her plans. She didn't need love, she required success. Sarah's repair stand brought her to the attention of local entrepreneurs, men and women testing the waters of America's new economic freedom. One was Ray Jenkins, a trucker who'd started hauling lumber on the side. You're sharp, kid, Ray said, tossing her a soda as she fixed his bike. Heard you're sniffing around the timber trade. I know a guy in Dayton who needs oak for furniture. Interested? Sarah's pulse quickened. This was it, a real lead. She nodded, her mind already mapping the deal. Ray's connection could link her to the mills, bypassing intermediaries. But as she locked up her stand, a letter from Emma arrived, forwarded by Linda. The handwriting was neat, but the words dripped with smugness. I'm marrying Jake Sarah. He's the mayor's son. By next year, I'll be running this town. Sarah's jaw tightened. Jake, the man who'd broken her in her past life. Emma thought she'd won, but Sarah knew the truth. Jake was poison, and Emma drank it willingly. Sarah tore the letter in half, her resolve hardening. Emma could chase her delusion. Sarah was building something tangible, a business, a legacy. As she walked home under a starlit sky, Millfield's quiet streets felt less like a cage and more like a starting line. She'd prove them wrong, all of them, and when she did, Emma's smug words would be nothing but dust. The winter of 1978 settled over Millfield, Ohio, like a heavy quilt blanketing the town in snow and silence. The economic malaise of the late 1970s clung to the air with shuttered factories casting long shadows over main streets boarded up storefronts. The Carter administration's small business initiatives were starting to take root, offering hope to those willing to seize it, but for most, survival meant scraping by. Sarah Carter, now 17, stood at the heart of this shifting landscape, her bicycle repair stand a beacon for travelers on their way to Dayton. Her hands, calloused from years of wielding tools and butchering pigs, moved precisely as she patched tires and tightened chains. Each repair was a step toward something bigger, a lumber empire built on the bones of her past life knowledge. Sarah's days were a blur of work and study. At Millfield Community College, she devoured courses on supply chains and market analysis, her notebook filled with sketches of lumber routes and profit margins. The government's push for entrepreneurship had lowered tuition, but Sarah still needed money for rent and books. She'd taken $50 from her mother Linda's cash box months ago, a desperate act that had severed their little trust. Linda's rage had been volcanic. "You're no daughter of mine," she'd screamed, her voice echoing through their cramped clapboard house. Sarah had stood tall, her jaw set. "I'm not your pawn, either. I'm building a life." The words felt like a declaration of war, but the ache in Sarah's chest was undeniable. She'd always craved Linda's approval, a flicker of the love lavished on her sister Emma. That hope was fading, replaced by a steely resolve to prove herself. At Henry Thompson's carpentry workshop, Sarah learned the practical side of the lumber trade. Henry, with his weathered hands and cautious wisdom, taught her how to spot quality oak and negotiate with suppliers. "You've got guts, kid," he said one frosty morning as they sorted planks for a furniture order. "But guts alone won't get you past the bureaucrats. You need connections." Sarah nodded, her past life memories guiding her. She'd seen Henry become a millionaire by riding the suburban boom and knew which mills and builders would rise with it. Her repair stand was more than a side hustle, a network. Truckers like Ray Jenkins, who hauled goods to Columbus, tipped her off about lumber demand. Ray said big furniture stores were popping up, tossing her a cigarette, which she didn't smoke. They're hungry for wood. You and Sarah grinned, pocketing the tip. Count me in. Mary Thompson, Henry's daughter, became an unexpected ally. Her leg brace clinked as she helped Sarah load timber, her quiet strength a mirror to Sarah's own. Mary's injury from saving a child from a runaway horse had left the Thompsons drowning in medical bills. Dad's worried we'll lose the house, Mary confided one evening, her breath visible in the cold. Sarah saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear she'd felt in her past life when survival seemed out of reach. Stick with me, Sarah said, her voice firm. We'll build something big enough to cover those bills. Mary's nod was hesitant but hopeful, and Sarah felt a spark of connection. For years she'd fought alone, but Mary's trust reminded her that she could build more than a business, she could make a community. Home was a different story. Linda's favoritism for Emma now in Pineville, Indiana, was a constant wound. Letters from Emma arrived weekly, filled with boasts about her engagement to Jake, the mayor's son. He's my ticket out, Emma wrote, her words dripping with smugness. Sarah knew Jake from her past life, a charming drunk who'd beaten her into submission before she escaped and built her empire. Emma thought she was stealing Sarah's path to wealth, but Sarah saw the truth. Jake was a trap, and Emma was walking into it unthinkingly. Linda, clutching Emma's letters, barely noticed Sarah. You're selfish, she snapped one night as Sarah ate a cold supper. Emma's suffering out there, and you're playing shopkeeper. Sarah's fork paused, her heart twisting. She wanted to scream that Emma had chosen this, that Linda's love was a one-way street. Instead, she said, I'm not her keeper, or yours. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow outside. Sarah's past life memories were her guide, but they came with shadows. She remembered the car crash that ended her first life, the blinding light and the voice whispering, one more chance. It wasn't just a second life, it was a test. Emma, too, must have heard that voice, her reborn ambition fueling her rush to Pineville. Sarah wondered what drove her sister. Was it envy? Or something deeper? Emma's jealousy had turned deadly in their past life, poisoning Sarah's food in a final act of spite. Now Sarah was determined to stay one step ahead. She poured her energy into her repair stand, saving every dime for her first lumber deal. Ray Jenkins introduced her to a mill owner in Dayton who needed oak for a furniture chain. It's a small order, Ray said, but it's a start. Sarah's pulse raced. This was her chance to break into the market. One night, as Sarah tallied her earnings, Linda appeared, her face pale. Sarah, we're going to Pineville. Emma's in trouble. Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd expected this. Emma's letters had hinted at trouble, but Sarah knew it was a ploy. Linda's eyes were frantic, her voice pleading. She's your sister. You owe her. Sarah's laugh was bitter. I owe her nothing. She chose Jake. But Linda's desperation was relentless, and Sarah saw no way out. She packed a small bag, her mind racing. Pineville was Jake's territory, a place where her past life nightmares began. She'd go, but not for Emma. She'd go to protect herself. As the bus pulled out of Millfield, the snow falling thick and fast, Sarah felt the weight of her past life, and this one converging. Emma's trap was waiting, but Sarah Carter was no one's prey. The bus to Pineville, Indiana, rattled through the snowy night, its headlights cutting through the darkness of February 1979. Sarah Carter sat near the back, her breath fogging the window as she stared at the endless fields. The late 1970s had left rural America gasping, with small towns like Pineville clinging to survival as farms consolidated and jobs vanished. The government's youth relocation program had dumped kids like Emma into places where hope was as scarce as money. Sarah's mother, Linda, sat beside her, clutching Emma's letter, claiming she was in trouble. Sarah didn't buy it. Emma's smug words at the train station, "I'll be the tycoon's wife," echoed in her mind. This wasn't a cry for help. It was a power play, and Sarah was walking into it with eyes wide open. Pineville was a speck of a town, its main street lined with a general store, a bar, and a church with a peeling steeple. The mayor's house, a two-story brick affair, stood out like a sore thumb among the sagging farmhouses. Sarah knew it well from her past life, when she'd been married to Jake, the mayor's son, a man whose charm masked a vicious streak. She'd endured his fists, his drunken rages, until she'd escaped and built her fast food empire. Now Emma had married him, chasing the wealth Sarah had achieved in that other life. As the bus stopped, Linda gripped Sarah's arm. "You'll help her, won't you?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "I'll see what's going on." She stepped into the cold, her boots crunching on ice, and her past life memories were a warning Jake was in trouble and Emma was not innocent. The mayor's house buzzed with wedding preparations. Lanterns hung from the porch and villagers milled about their faces mixed with curiosity and disdain. Sarah and Linda were ushered inside where Emma stood in a white dress, her cornflower blue eyes gleaming with triumph. Jake, tall and handsome, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, had his arm around her. Red marks on Emma's neck hinted at his volatility, but she leaned into him, her smile defiant. "Mom." "Sarah." Emma called, her voice sweet but sharp. "You came to witness my happiness." Linda rushed to her, tears in her eyes, but Sarah stayed back, her gaze locked on Jake. She remembered his cruelty, the way he'd humiliated her in front of the village. Emma thought she'd won, but Sarah saw the truth. Jake was a ticking bomb. The wedding feast was chaotic, with tables crammed into the mayor's barn. Villagers whispered about Emma, how she'd thrown herself at Jake after just 2 meetings, how she was only 15. "She's no better than a city girl looking for a meal ticket," one woman muttered. Sarah sipped her coffee, avoiding the wine Emma pushed toward her. In her past life, Emma's poisoned pie had nearly killed her. She wasn't taking chances. Jake's friends, a rough crew of local troublemakers, eyed Sarah with unsettling interest. One, a lanky man named Tommy, leaned close. "Your mom made a deal," he whispered, his breath sour. $500 and you stay here with me." Sarah's blood ran cold. She glanced at Linda, who avoided her eyes, fussing over Emma's dress. The betrayal hit like a slap. Linda had sold her out just as she'd feared. Sarah's heart pounded, but her past life memories steadied her. She'd been trapped before, tied up in a barn like this one, forced to marry Jake. Not this time. She slipped a fruit knife from the table, hiding it in her sleeve. Emma approached her, smile venomous. "Sarah, drink with us," she urged, holding a glass of wine. "It's my wedding." Sarah raised her coffee mug instead, clinking it against Emma's glass. "To your happiness," she said, her voice flat. Emma's eyes narrowed, sensing resistance. Jake stepped in, his grin forced. "Come on, Sarah, one sip." The room felt smaller, the air thick with danger. Sarah's gaze flicked to Tommy and his crew, closing in like wolves. Without warning, Sarah lunged, pinning Emma to the ground. The knife flashed, and Emma's scream pierced the air as her pinky fell, blood pooling on the dirt floor. "You want my life," Sarah hissed, her voice low and fierce. "You'll pay for it." The thugs froze, their bravado crumbling. Linda shrieked, but Sarah didn't flinch. She'd learned in her past life that fearlessness was her weapon. In that other life, she'd endured pain to survive. Now she'd inflict it to protect herself. Emma clutched her hand, sobbing, but Sarah saw the hatred in her eyes. This wasn't over. Sarah stood, wiping the knife on her jeans. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice carrying over the stunned crowd. "Please don't follow me." She grabbed her bag and strode out, the cold air a relief against her burning skin. Linda didn't follow, too busy tending to Emma. As Sarah boarded the bus back to Millfield, the stars above Pineville glittered like the promise of her future. Emma's trap had failed, but Sarah knew her sister's reborn ambition wouldn't fade. In her past life, Sarah had escaped Jake by sheer will. Now she'd escape Emma's schemes the same way. Back in Millfield, her repair stand and her plans with Henry Thompson waited. The lumber trade was calling, and Sarah Carter was ready to answer, with or without her family. The Pineville, Indiana barn glowed with lantern light, the air thick with the scent of roasted pork and cheap whiskey. It was February 1979, and the wedding feast for Emma Carter and Jake, the mayor's son, was in full swing. The small town, battered by the late 1970s farm crisis, clung to moments like these raucous gatherings that briefly drowned out the worry of foreclosures and shrinking harvests. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Sarah Carter felt the weight of her past life pressing in. She'd been here before, in another life, married to Jake, enduring his cruelty, until she broke free to build a fast food empire. Her sister Emma, reborn with the same memories, now thought she could steal that success by marrying Jake. Sarah's coffee mug was cold in her hands, a shield against the wine Emma kept pushing her way. She knew better than to trust her sister's smile. Radiant in her white dress, Emma glided through the crowd, her cornflower blue eyes gleaming with triumph. Jake, handsome but unsteady, his tie loosened and shirt rumpled, kept a possessive arm around her. Red marks on Emma's neck hinted at his temper, but she leaned into him, her laughter too bright. Sarah's mother, Linda, fussed over Emma, oblivious to the villagers' whispers. "She's only 15, one woman muttered, her voice sharp with disdain. met him twice and climbed into his bed. No shame. Sarah's gaze flicked to Jake's friends, a rough bunch lounging at a corner table, their eyes fixed on her with unsettling intent. Tommy, the lanky one, leaned close, his breath sour. "Your mom's got a deal for you," he said, grinning. $500 and you stay in Pineville. With me. Sarah's heart froze. She glanced at Linda, who looked away, fussing with a napkin. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Sarah's past life memories surged a barn like this one, ropes biting her wrists, Jake's laughter as the village watched her humiliation. In that life, Emma had poisoned herself out of envy, a pie laced with pesticide that nearly ended her. Emma's reborn ambition was clear trap. Sarah here steal her future. Sarah's hand slipped to the fruit knife tucked in her sleeve, its weight a quiet promise. Emma approached her, smile saccharine, holding out a glass of wine. She urged Sarah to toast with us, her voice dripping with false warmth. "It's my wedding," Jake chimed in, his grin forced. "One sip, Sarah. Don't be a spoil sport." The room seemed to shrink, the air heavy with danger. Sarah raised her coffee mug, clinking it against Emma's glass. "To your future," she said, her voice flat, her eyes locked on Emma's. She saw the flicker of frustration in her sister's gaze. Emma knew she wasn't drinking. The tension snapped like a taut wire. Tommy and his crew stood, their movement slow but deliberate, closing in. Sarah's pulse raced, but her past life grit steadied her. She'd survived worse, Jake's fists, village scorn, a life of scraping by. This time she'd fight first. "Sarah," Emma said softly, stepping closer. "Why don't you stay here? We could be sisters again like before." The lie was blatant, her eyes gleaming with greed. Sarah saw it, the same envy that had poisoned her before. Tommy laughed, his voice cruel. "Your mom already agreed. 500 and you're mine. Jake'll look after you too." Sarah's blood boiled. Linda's betrayal was a wound, but Emma's scheming sparked her fury. In a flash, Sarah lunged, tackling Emma to the ground. The barn went silent, save for the clatter of a dropped plate. Sarah pinned Emma's wrist, the fruit knife gleaming in the lantern light. "You want my life?" she hissed, her voice low and fierce. "You'll pay for it." The blade came down swift and precise, severing Emma's pinky. Blood pooled on the dirt floor, crimson against the straw. Emma's scream shattered the air, a high, piercing wail that froze the crowd. Tommy and his friends stumbled back, their bravado crumbling. Linda shrieked, rushing to Emma, but Sarah stood, wiping the knife on her jeans. "I'm done here," she said, her voice carrying over the chaos. "Please don't come after me." She grabbed her bag, her boots thudding as she strode into the snowy night. The bus back to Millfield was nearly empty, the engine's hum a counterpoint to Sarah's racing thoughts. She'd crossed a line, but it felt right. In her past life, she'd endured pain to survive. Now she'd inflicted it to protect herself. Emma's reborn ambition had pushed her too far, and Linda's betrayal was the final straw. Sarah remembered the voice from her past life whispering, "One more chance," after the car crash that ended it. That chance wasn't just for her, it was for Emma too, and she'd squandered it on greed. As the bus rolled through the dark, Sarah's resolve hardened. Pineville was Emma's trap, not hers. Back in Millfield, her repair stand and her plans with Henry Thompson waited. The lumber trade was her future, and no one, not Emma, not Linda, would take it from her. Spring 1979 bloomed in Millfield, Ohio, the air sweet with apple blossoms and the promise of change. The nation was clawing its way out of the economic slump, with the Carter administration's small business loans sparking hope in towns struck by factory closures. Sarah Carter, now 17, stood at the center of this shift, her bicycle repair stand a hub for locals and travelers alike. Her hands stained with grease and sawdust were her transformation tools. In her past life, she'd built a fast food empire from nothing. Now she was chasing a new dream, lumber, the backbone of America's suburban boom. Her past life memories, sharp as the scent of fresh-cut oak, guided her every move. Sarah's days were a whirlwind of action. At Millfield Community College, she aced her business courses, her mind buzzing with strategies to corner the lumber market. The government's push for entrepreneurship had opened doors, and Sarah was ready to charge through. Her repair stand set up near the Greyhound stop drew a steady stream of customers, farmers, truckers, even a few city folks passing through. "You're cheaper than the garage," said Ray Jenkins, the trucker who'd become her informal advisor. "And faster." Sarah grinned, tightening a chain. "Speed's my edge, Ray. Got any lumber leads?" He tossed her a soda, his eyes twinkling. Talk to a mill in Dayton. They need oak for furniture. Big order. You and Sarah's heart leaped. This was her break. Henry Thompson's workshop was her second home. Henry, his face lined with worry over mounting medical bills for his daughter, Mary's leg injury, had agreed to partner with Sarah. "You're crazy, kid," he said, stacking planks. "Lumber's a gamble, permits inspectors bribes." Sarah nodded, her past life knowledge her ace. She'd seen Henry become a millionaire in that other life, navigating the same risks. "We'll play it smart," she said. "Suburbs are growing. Furniture stores need wood. We'll supply it." Henry's skepticism softened his trust in Sarah growing. Mary, her brace less noticeable, now joined them, her quiet strength a steady presence. "Dad's in because of you," she told Sarah, sanding a cedar board. "So am I." Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't known since childhood, a sense of family not by blood but by choice. Their first deal came through a contract to supply oak to a Dayton furniture chain. The catch was the local forestry deputy, Cole Harris, a wiry man with a penchant for extortion. At the mill, he lounged by the loading dock, his boots propped on a crate. $500, he said, smirking. "Or your shipment sits." Sarah's blood boiled, but she kept her calm. In her past life, she'd dealt with men like Cole, trading threats for favors. She pulled out a notepad, scribbling an IOU. "Take this," she said, her voice steady. "I'll pay with interest." Cole tore it up, laughing. "Cash, girl. Business is business." Mary, standing beside Sarah, bristled. "You're a crook," she snapped. Cole's smirk widened. "And you're out of your league." Sarah's past life grit kicked in. She stepped forward, picking up an iron shovel from the dock. "Here's the deal, Cole," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Sign the permit or we'll settle this the hard way. I'll fight you. When the cops come, they'll see your scam. You'll walk away scarred and I'll still get my shipment through." Her eyes burned with the fearlessness she'd honed in her past life when debt collectors had come for her and she'd fought back with a severed finger. Cole's men shifted uneasy. The tension hung thick, broken only when Cole laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "You're a wild one," he said, signing the permit. "Come by sometime, Sarah. We'll talk business." Sarah nodded, hiding her relief. The shipment went through, netting them $2,000, half for Henry, half reinvested. Back in Millfield, Sarah used her share to secure a storage lot near the highway, a plot she knew from her past life would become prime real estate. The deal wasn't easy, permits required finesse, and local officials weren't above asking for kickbacks. But Sarah's boldness, honed by years of surviving Jake's abuse in her past life, carried her through. She and Henry scouted mills, building a network that stretched to Columbus. Mary proved invaluable, her sharp mind catching details Sarah missed. Mary said, "You're not alone anymore," one night as they counted lumber stacks under a starry sky. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd always fought solo, but Mary's loyalty was a lifeline. The ache of Linda's betrayal lingered, but Sarah pushed it aside. Family wasn't blood, it was the people who stood by you. As CarterWood Co took shape, Sarah felt the gears of her future turning. Emma's letter from Pineville, boasting of her marriage to Jake, was a distant echo. Sarah knew Jake's true nature, a drunk who'd break Emma before she could break him. In her past life, Sarah had escaped him. Now she'd escape Emma's shadow. The lumber yard was her battleground, and Sarah Carter was ready to conquer it one plank at a time. By the summer of 1980, Millfield, Ohio was stirring with cautious hope. The economic gloom of the late 1970s was easing, spurred by federal loans and tax breaks that fueled small businesses across rural America. Sarah Carter, now 18, stood at the helm of CarterWood Co, her lumber venture growing stronger with each deal. The storage lot she'd secured near the highway hummed with activity trucks hauling oak and pine to furniture factories in Dayton and Columbus. Sarah's past life memories, vivid as the scent of fresh sawdust, had guided her to this moment. In that other life, she'd built a fast food empire after escaping an abusive marriage. Now she was forging a new legacy, one plank at a time. But the shadow of her sister Emma loomed, a reminder that success came with enemies. Sarah's days were relentless. She balanced final exams at Millfield Community College by overseeing shipments, and her notebook was filled with profit margins and supplier contacts. Her repair stand, still a fixture at the Greyhound stop, was now a side hustle, its earnings funneled into CarterWood. Henry Thompson, her partner, had shed his initial skepticism, his weathered face creasing with pride as their first significant deal netted $5,000. His daughter Mary, her leg nearly healed from her accident, managed the yard's inventory with a sharp eye. "You're changing things," Sarah Mary said one sweltering afternoon as they stacked cedar planks. "This town's got hope because of you." Sarah smiled, but the weight of her past life lingered. She'd fought alone then, betrayed by family. Now Mary's loyalty was a lifeline, a chosen family that eased the ache of her mother's rejection. The lumberyard wasn't just a business, it was a community. Ray Jenkins, the trucker who'd tipped Sarah off to her first deal, now hauled their loads, his easy grin a constant. Even Deputy Cole Harris, once a bribe-demanding obstacle, had become an ally, his respect won by Sarah's fearless stand at the mill. "You're trouble," Carter Cole said, signing a permit with a chuckle. But the good kind. Sarah's past life grit, honed by surviving debt collectors and a brutal husband, had taught her to turn foes into friends. She knew the suburban boom was coming, with tract homes sprouting across Ohio, and CarterWood was poised to supply the furniture that filled them. But success drew attention, and not all of it was welcome. One humid evening, as Sarah locked the yard's gate, a familiar figure emerged from the dusk. Emma, her four-fingered hand clutching a worn suitcase. Linda trailed behind her face, pinched with resentment. Sarah's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen them since Pineville, when she'd severed Emma's pinky to escape her trap. Now they stood before her new three-story office, a brick building with a sign proclaiming CarterWood Co. Emma's eyes, once bright with ambition, were dull with scars, her dress patched and faded. "Nice place," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm opening a diner next door. Please give me the land." It wasn't a request, it was a demand. Linda nodded, her voice pleading. "She's your sister Sarah. Help her." Sarah's laugh was cold. "You show up after a year demanding what I built." She stepped closer, her gaze locked on Emma. "You chose Jake. You chose Pineville." Emma's face twisted, her mutilated hand raised like a trophy. "You owe me," she hissed. "I went to the countryside for you. I married that bastard Jake. He beat me, cheated on me, and left me with nothing. This," she waved her hand, "is your fault." Sarah's heart thudded, but not with guilt. She saw Emma's game, using pity to claim what she hadn't earned. Emma's envy had turned deadly in her past life, poisoning Sarah's food. Now reborn, she was trying to steal Sarah's success again. The office was filled with Sarah's allies, Henry, Mary, Ray, and local business owners who'd come to celebrate a new contract. Their murmurs of disbelief cut through Emma's tirade. Mrs. Larson, a baker who'd known Sarah since childhood, spoke up. "You've got some nerve, Emma. Sarah was out in the snow working while you were coddled. Now you want her land." The room nodded, their loyalty a shield. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude. These were her people, not the family who'd sold her out. Linda's face reddened. "This is private," she snapped. "Stay out of it." But Sarah shook her head. "No, Mom. This is my home, my business. You don't get to walk in and take it." Emma slammed her hand on a table, her voice rising. "You cut off my finger, you owe me everything, your land, your shares." Sarah stepped forward, her voice low and dangerous. "I owe you nothing. You tried to trap me in Pineville to sell me to Jake's friends. I fought my way out like I always have." She grabbed Emma's arm, her grip firm. "Want to push me? I'll fight harder." Emma's eyes widened, but before she could speak, Sarah slapped her, the sound echoing. Linda gasped, but Sarah didn't stop. She slapped Emma again, each strike a release of years of betrayal. "Get out," Sarah said, her voice cold, "and stay away from my land." Emma stumbled back, her face red with marks, her bravado crumbling. Linda's pleas turned to apologies, but Sarah was done listening. She called Mary over. "Take our friends to the yard," she said. "Show them the new shipment." As the group left, Sarah stood alone with her mother and sister, the weight of her past life heavy. She'd thought family could be salvaged, but Linda's betrayal in Pineville, selling her for $500, had shattered that hope. Emma's reborn greed was just the final nail. Sarah pointed to the door. "Go, now." Emma grabbed her suitcase, her eyes burning with hatred, and Linda followed, her shoulders slumped. As they disappeared into the dusk, Sarah felt a strange peace. She'd chosen herself, and it was enough. The autumn of 1980 painted Millfield's fields in gold, but the air carried the tension of a town on the cusp of change. The economic recovery was fragile, with small businesses like CarterWood Co. driving hope in a region scarred by the late 1970s downturn. Sarah Carter, now 19, stood taller, her lumberyard a bustling hub that supplied furniture factories across Ohio. Her past life memories of building an empire after escaping an abusive marriage were her guide, sharpened by the voice that had whispered, "One more chance," after she died in a car crash. CarterWood's success was no accident. It was the product of Sarah's grit, honed by years of surviving betrayal and hardship. But as her star rose, her sister Emma's fell, her reborn ambitions spiraling into ruin. Sarah's days were a symphony of progress. She graduated from Millfield Community College, and her diploma was a badge of determination. Now a sprawling lot with a new warehouse, the lumber yard hummed with workers loading trucks. Henry Thompson, his face less lined now that his family's debts were easing, oversaw production, while Mary, her leg nearly healed, managed accounts with a precision that rivaled Sarah's. Ray Jenkins hauled their loads, and his truck was a lifeline to markets in Columbus and beyond. Even Deputy Cole Harris, once a corrupt hurdle, was now a regular at the yard, his patrols ensuring their shipments went unmolested. "You've got this town eating out of your hand," Cole said, tipping his hat. Sarah smirked. "Not yet, but I'm working on it." The suburban boom was in full swing, with tract homes sprouting across the Midwest, each needing furniture that CarterWood supplied. Sarah's past life knowledge told her which mills to trust and which contracts to chase. A recent deal with a Cleveland chain had netted $10,000, half reinvested into a new sawmill. But success came with scrutiny. Rumors reached Sarah of a new diner in Pineville run by Emma, who'd copied Carterwood's business model: low prices, high volume. "She's stealing your playbook," Mary warned, her brow furrowed. Sarah's jaw tightened. Emma's letter boasting of her marriage to Jake had hinted at her plans. Sarah knew Jake's true nature, a drunk who'd beaten her in her past life. Emma's diner was desperate for glory, and Sarah sensed it would fail. The call came on a crisp October morning. Linda, her voice trembling, stood at the lumberyard's gate. "Sarah, Emma's in trouble. Her diner, it's a mess. You have to come." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, but the urgency in Linda's eyes, so rare for her, stirred a flicker of duty. She agreed, not for Emma, but to see the end of her sister's schemes. The bus to Pineville was a familiar ride, the fields now golden under an autumn sun. Pineville's main street was quieter, and its general store was half empty. Emma's diner, a squat building with a hand-painted sign, was surrounded by angry locals, their shouts carrying through the air. "Poisoned us," one man yelled, waving a receipt. Sarah's stomach churned. She'd seen this in her past life, Emma's desperation turning reckless. Inside the diner was a disaster. Tables were sticky, the air thick with the stench of spoiled meat. Emma stood behind the counter, her four-fingered hand trembling as she faced a health inspector. "It's a misunderstanding," she pleaded, but the inspector's clipboard told a different story. Spoiled pork, fake permits, cockroaches in the kitchen. Emma's diner was a fraud. Sarah's past life memories flashed Emma's poisoned pie, meant to kill her out of envy. Now Emma had poisoned customers, not with intent, but with negligence. The inspector shut the diner down, his voice cold. "You're done, Miss Carter. Expect charges." The crowd outside jeered, throwing eggs that splattered the windows. Linda clutched Sarah's arm, tears streaming. "Help her, Sarah! She's your sister!" Sarah shook her off, her voice steady. "She did this to herself." Emma's eyes met hers, burning with hatred. "You think you're better," she spat. "I just wanted what you had." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You wanted my life without my fight. You don't get it, Emma. Success isn't stolen." The inspector led Emma away, her wrists cuffed as the crowd's shouts grew louder. Pineville's new mayor, a stern man replacing Jake's father, used the scandal to crack down on unregulated businesses, shutting down half the town's shops. Emma became a pariah, her name synonymous with fraud. Sarah returned to Millfield, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken. Emma's fall was justice, but it stirred memories of their past life when Sarah had sought Linda's love only to be exploited. The voice that had given her this second chance hadn't promised fairness, only opportunity. Sarah had seized hers. Emma had squandered it. Back at the lumberyard, Mary greeted her with a nod. "Heard about Pineville," she said. "You okay?" Sarah nodded, but the question lingered. She'd built an empire, but the cost her family, her trust, still stung. As she walked the yard, the stacks of lumber a testament to her triumph, Sarah knew Emma's story wasn't over. Her sister's envy was a fire that wouldn't die easily. The winter of 1981 cloaked Millfield, Ohio, in a blanket of frost, the air sharp with the promise of snow. The town was finding its footing, buoyed by the slow economic recovery of the early 1980s. Small businesses like Sarah Carter's CarterWood Co were the heartbeat of this revival, transforming the once quiet highway lot into a bustling hub of lumber and ambition. At 19, Sarah stood tall, her hands calloused from work, her mind sharpened by past life memories of building a fast food empire after escaping an abusive marriage. The mysterious voice that had whispered one more chance after her death in a car crash fueled her drive, a reminder that this life was hers to shape. But as CarterWood soared, her sister Emma's descent reached its nadir, her reborn envy igniting a final desperate act. Sarah's days were a whirlwind of progress. The lumberyard, now a sprawling complex, with a new sawmill, supplied furniture factories across the Midwest, capitalizing on the suburban boom. Henry Thompson, his financial burdens eased by their success, oversaw production with a quiet pride. His daughter Mary, her leg fully healed, handled logistics with a precision that matched Sarah's vision. Ray Jenkins, their trusted trucker, hauled loads to Cleveland, while Deputy Cole Harris ensured smooth dealings with local officials. "You're a force," Sarah Cole said, signing a permit with a grin. "Millfield's lucky to have you." Sarah nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Emma's diner scandal in Pineville had shaken the region, and Sarah knew her sister's rage wouldn't end with a shuttered business. The call came on a frigid January morning. A worker at the lumberyard, his face pale, rushed to Sarah. "There's trouble at the east corner," he stammered. "Someone's tampering with the stacks." Sarah's heart sank. She grabbed a wooden club, her boots crunching through the snow as she headed to the secluded edge of the yard. The smell of kerosene hit her first, sharp and unmistakable. Then she heard the voice Emma's raw with hatred. "You think you're untouchable, Sarah?" Emma stood amid the lumber piles, her four-fingered hand clutching a box of matches, kerosene glistening on the wood. "You took everything, my chance, my life. Let's see you burn." Her eyes, wild with desperation, glinted in the moonlight. Sarah's past life memories surged: Jake's abuse, Emma's poisoned pie, the endless fight to rise above. She'd known Emma was reborn, driven by the same cosmic chance, but this was madness. "You chose Jake." "Sarah," said her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "You decided to copy me to cheat your way up. This is on you." Emma's laugh was hysterical, her words spilling like venom. "Jake treated you like a queen, but me, he beat me, drank away our money. You got the empire, I got the bruises. It's not fair." She raised the match, her hand trembling. Sarah tightened her grip on the club, her past life grit taking over. She'd faced debt collectors, corrupt officials, and Jake's fists. She wouldn't let Emma destroy what she'd built. Before Emma could strike the match, Sarah swung the club, a sharp crack echoing as it connected with the back of Emma's head. Emma crumpled the matches, scattering in the snow. Sarah stood over her, breathing hard, the blood on the club a stark contrast to the white ground. She knew her strength. Emma wouldn't die, but she'd feel it. Sarah called her workers, who fetched the police. When they arrived, their faces darkened at the kerosene stench. Shaking his head, one officer said this could have burned half the county. Sarah nodded, handing them a thermos of coffee. "I'm getting guard dogs," she said, "and I'd appreciate extra patrols." The officer nodded, impressed by her calm. As Emma was cuffed and led away, Sarah overheard the police radio crackle. "Pineville's got news," an officer said. "Jake, the mayor's son, his drowning wasn't an accident. Evidence points to her." Sarah's blood ran cold. In her past life, Jake had been her tormentor, a drunk who'd chained her to a life of pain. Emma, it seemed, had escaped him the only way she knew how: murder. The police confirmed it. Jake's mother had found letters from Emma detailing her plan to drown him in the shallow river, staging it as an accident. The mayor, disgraced, had resigned, and Pineville was reeling. Sarah felt no pity for Emma, only a grim satisfaction. Her sister's reborn ambition had led her to this arson fraud, and now murder. Back at the yard, Mary met Sarah with a worried glance. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Sarah nodded, but the weight of Emma's hatred lingered. She'd spent her past life seeking her family's love only to be exploited. She'd chosen herself this time, but the cost-cutting ties with Linda, watching Emma destroy herself, was heavy. She walked the yard, the lumber stacks a testament to her triumph, but her heart ached for the sister she'd once hoped to save. Emma's final act had been a mirror of their past life, when envy had driven her to poison. Now Sarah saw that some bonds were too broken to mend. The summer of 1982 bathed Millfield, Ohio, in golden light, the town thriving as the economic recovery took hold. CarterWood Co was a cornerstone of this resurgence, its lumberyard now a regional powerhouse, supplying furniture for the sprawling suburbs of the Midwest. Sarah Carter, at 20, was a name whispered with awe, her journey from a bicycle repair stand to a business tycoon the stuff of local legend. Her past life memories of surviving Jake's abuse and building a fast food empire had guided her, sharpened by the mysterious voice that had granted her one more chance after a fatal car crash. Now, as chairwoman of CarterWood, Sarah stood at the peak of her ambition, her heart finally free of the family that had once held her back. Sarah's life was a tapestry of achievement. She'd enrolled in Ohio State University, and her nights had been spent studying business alongside elites who saw her as a peer. By day, she oversaw CarterWood, its new three-story headquarters symbolizing her success. Henry Thompson, now a partner in name and spirit, retired his carpentry tools, and his family was secure thanks to their profits. Mary, married to Deputy Cole Harris, managed the company's finances, and her sharp mind was a cornerstone of their growth. Their son, a rambunctious toddler, ran through the yard giggling as he declared he'd marry Sarah one day. "Dream big, kid," Sarah teased, ruffling his hair. Mary laughed, but her eyes held a question. "What about you, Sarah? Ever think about settling down?" Sarah waved it off. "Fate's for love, not me. I'd rather build than chase." The early 1980s were a gold rush for entrepreneurs, with Reagan's policies fueling a real estate boom. Sarah's past life knowledge had positioned CarterWood perfectly. She'd bought land that would soon be prime commercial property, her warehouses stocked with oak and pine for the furniture craze. Ray Jenkins, now a full-time driver for CarterWood, delivered loads to Chicago, his stories of the road a nightly ritual at the diner. Cole, a steadfast ally, ensured their permits sailed through. "You've changed, Millfield," he told Sarah, his voice earnest. She smiled, but her thoughts drifted to the cost of her rise. Linda, her mother, lived quietly with Sarah's father, Robert, who'd returned from Dayton. Sarah sent them $50 a month, a gesture of duty, not affection. Linda's silence since Emma's arrest spoke louder than her past accusations. Emma's fate had sealed the rift. Sentenced to death for Jake's murder, arson, and fraud, she was executed in August 1981. A police officer over coffee at Sarah's office shared her final words, "I'll come back reborn again." Sarah had laughed, her voice dry. People aren't cats. No 9 lives. Emma's envy, reborn like Sarah's ambition, had consumed her. In their past life, Emma's poisoned pie had nearly killed Sarah. Now her attempt to burn the lumber yard had ended her. Sarah felt no guilt, only a quiet sorrow for the sister who'd chosen hatred over redemption. The police investigation had closed Jake's case. His drowning, orchestrated by Emma, was a desperate escape from his abuse. Sarah, who'd known Jake's cruelty in her past life, felt a grim justice. He'd broken them both, but only Sarah had risen. Sarah's college years opened her world. She met tycoons and visionaries, their ideas sparking her own. CarterWood expanded into real estate, her investments doubling as cities grew. Sarah Carter became synonymous with success, and her story became a beacon for rural America. Yet in quiet moments, she reflected on her journey. The voice that had given her the second chance hadn't promised love or family-only opportunity. She'd sought Linda's approval in her past life, only to be drained by it. Now she'd chosen herself, and the freedom was exhilarating. The ache of her family's betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined her. One evening, as Sarah walked through the lumber yard, the setting sun cast long shadows over the stacks. Mary joined her, their toddler asleep in Cole's arms nearby. "You did it, Sarah," Mary said, her voice warm. "You built this from nothing." Sarah nodded, her eyes on the horizon. "Not nothing," she said softly. "From everything I learned then and now." She thought of Emma Jake and the pain that had forged her. In her past life, she'd been a survivor. In this one, she was a conqueror. As the stars emerged, Sarah Carter smiled, her empire a testament to a second chance seized with both hands.